I have a theory that a lot of people might disagree with, but I think that the UFC hates Tom Aspinall. Let's get into it. I've had this feeling for a long time, but after UFC 321, I'm fully convinced. Let's just look at the patterns here. Every time that Tom Aspinall achieves something, the UFC and Dana White downplays it. This was Tom's first undisputed title fight, and the UFC didn't even try to stack this card to make him look good. Let's just call it what it is. This was one of the weakest cards we've seen for a heavyweight main event in years. They literally put a female co-main event that absolutely nobody cared about. This card has zero star power. It's like the UFC wanted this card to underperform. It's really interesting as well because an interview that I personally did with Tom Aspinall about a year ago, he explicitly said to me that he does not like confrontation despite being a fighter. So I can just imagine that this makes him extremely uncomfortable. I'm going to go through a bunch of themes backing up why I think the UFC hates him, so make sure you guys do stick around. To kick it off, let's start with the most recent, the eye poke and Dana White's reaction. Dana White's post-fight handling of Tom Aspinall getting poked in the eye and the fight getting called off was just embarrassing. Tom literally could not see out of his eye, but the UFC decided to keep him in the cage for at least 10 minutes after the fight and then also interview him while he's covering up one eye. This guy could potentially be blind and they're more focused on getting an interview with him. Then straight after the fight, Dana White in the post-fight press conference is subtly taking shots at Tom Aspinall.
I mean, he had Tom bloodied up. Tom didn't want to continue in the fight, so I think everybody was sleeping on Cyril Gane and sort of wrote him off.
And if you've been a fan of this sport for a couple of years at least, you would know how Dana White acts, and when he does not like someone, he takes subtle shots at them. Because obviously he can't just outright say he dislikes the heavyweight champion of his company. I just recently made a video on how Dana White and the UFC tried to tarnish Merab's reputation for years, where they would just say things to tarnish the reputation of their fighter without outright saying they don't like him.
The whole world knows about Merab's cut. He posted it. Our guys are so dumb, it's next level unbelievable.
The fact that Dana said he just didn't want to continue, what does anyone expect Tom to do when you're literally like half blind in the biggest fight of your career? Not to mention, in this same press conference, Dana White is also glazing Cyril Gane. This dude will glaze anyone except for Tom Aspinall. That's how you just know there's tension between these two. Like, Dana White just openly throws Tom Aspinall under the bus when it was literally Cyril Gane's fault for poking him in the eye, but doesn't say a single bad thing about Gane. The second theme is lack of promotion. Let's just be real, they barely promoted this fight. There was no marketing push that they would do for someone like Jon Jones, Conor McGregor, or any other champ. You can really tell how much the UFC likes a fighter based on how much they promote them. Take Belal Muhammad for example. There was zero promotion in his fight against JDM, and also a similar pattern here. They really understacked his first title defense. I think they do this just to purposely show that they don't pull numbers in, whereas when it's an Ilia Topuria fight, they'll always make sure to stack the main card as well as the prelims. Literally just compare it to Jon Jones's comeback fight. The contrast between promotion is insane. And I was so shocked that they didn't use the Jon Jones vacating the belt as a way to promote this fight. That alone would have sold this fight instantly. And in my opinion, the reason they didn't choose that angle is because Jon Jones has always been the UFC's golden goose. For whatever reason, they try so hard to protect this guy's image, but in the same breath, Jon Jones is the one destroying the image himself. But then you've got Tom Aspinall, a guy that never gets in any controversies, a guy that is very genuine and humble, but the UFC chooses to go in the complete opposite direction. This ties into the next theme, which is the Jon Jones factor. As I've just mentioned, the UFC loves Jon Jones, and Tom Aspinall threatens that narrative. Tom publicly called out Jones many times and was even promised the Jon Jones fight after beating Sergey Pavlovich, and then we all know what happened. Jones sat out for 6 months and Tom Aspinall got ghosted by the UFC regarding this fight. And Tom Aspinall publicly spoke about this, about how he was promised the fight multiple times, even started training camps, and then the UFC would just delay the fight until ultimately Jon Jones just retired.
Tom Aspinall, I didn't read it. I told you guys already, we'll get Aspinall versus Jones done. The heavyweight fight will happen. I'll announce that soon.
And the UFC doesn't like when fighters publicly talk about things like this. The UFC, for as much as I love this sport and this company, they are not transparent, and when someone pokes holes in that, you get them on your bad side. Even look at what Dana White said regarding Tom Aspinall in a press conference before this fight.
How impressed have you been with Tom and what he's done in the UFC?
Yeah, unbelievable. Saturday night's the big night for him though. Cyril was winning the entire fight with Francis, and Saturday is possibly a big coming out party for Aspinall if he goes in and does what people think he's capable of doing.
That's not Dana White supporting his new heavyweight champ or hyping him up. That's almost a backhanded compliment. Alright, this next theme is a bit more of a recent one, and this is Tom refusing to fight his friend. Tom recently publicly said that he would not fight his heavyweight friend that is ranked number 10, Ante, because he's a close trading partner and has also been around his family and just can't visualize fighting him, which is fair enough.
Well, now I've done it, I would be like, I'll vacate it and he can have his time.
Fair. Really? So if it comes to it, you're just not fighting him?
I wouldn't fight him. No chance. No chance.
We saw a similar situation with Aljo and Merab, and we saw how Dana White reacted to that.
Why did you even get into this sport if that's your mentality and the way that you think? I don't even want the title. I don't even want the championship. We're friends. We're this. We're that.
So as soon as Tom Aspinall said this, I was just face palming myself like, why would you say this publicly, especially if this guy is not in the top 5? There's no point of even mentioning it. If you know anything about Dana White, he hates this attitude. I can understand Aspinall's perspective as long as he's not choosing to hold up the division, which he very clearly said he wasn't going to do. We saw how that worked out with Merab. He chose not to fight his friend and stick to his morals, and now look where he's at. He's successful, and Dana White has actually started glazing Merab. When a UFC fighter chooses loyalty over business, the UFC hates that. Moving on to this next theme, which I personally think is one of the biggest factors as to why the UFC is starting to turn against Tom Aspinall, and this is Andy Aspinall. This is my boy. I also met this guy. He's a very nice guy. As much as I respect Andy, he's kind of harming his son's relationship with the UFC and his career. His dad has been openly critical of the UFC and the way that they have been treating Tom, and I respect that, but it's only working against him. He said multiple times that the UFC don't treat Tom fairly and have even broken their promises in the past, which is all true, but if you remember what I said early on in this video, the UFC does not like when you publicly criticize them. Not to mention, in a recent interview, Tom Aspinall's dad also said that he does not want Tom Aspinall to re-sign with the UFC after his remaining 3 fights is finished.
There's 3 more fights on the contract now.
Okay. So,
And I don't want to sign a new contract.
okay.
Personally,
So-
boxing for sure. The money is
More money.
yeah, more money. Why?
And he believes that Tom Aspinall could make way more money doing these big boxing fights, which is completely true, especially considering how big of a star Tom Aspinall is in his own right. But Andy, why the heck would you say this when he still has 3 fights left on his contract? Say this privately, not publicly, where you know Dana White is going to pay attention to this. And I can also imagine Dana White is putting 2 and 2 together after Tom Aspinall said he doesn't want to fight his friend who was ranked number 9 and coming up in the division. And then Tom Aspinall also has 3 fights left on his contract, and his own dad is saying he doesn't want him to re-sign. Dana White's probably putting these 2 things together and is starting to feel another Francis Ngannou situation on his hands here. We've seen this situation play out in the past with Nate Diaz, Francis Ngannou, and many other fighters where they publicly speak out against the company, especially regarding the contracts, and the UFC will just put them on ice. They will not give them fights, or they will try to delay their contract as much as possible to not only limit their opportunities outside of the organization, but also just to spite them. So I totally get where Andy's coming from, but this was not the way to do it, man. Alright, this next theme is the communication breakdown. When Jon Jones retired, Tom Aspinall publicly said that he heard about the news the same time as everyone else did, and when he got promoted to undisputed, again, he said he found out the same time as everyone else did publicly. That means the UFC didn't privately call him or do anything in private. They didn't even bother to give him a heads up. That's not normal, man. Imagine being the face of an entire division and not even getting a call first privately. Not to mention, the UFC also knew that this could possibly be an option of Jon Jones retiring, but they still chose to book him versus Stipe. It's not like the UFC were completely blinded to the fact that Jones could retire after that fight. Jon Jones publicly said this in press conferences, in interviews leading up to the fight.
He does nothing for me. 7 years younger, like 35 pounds bigger than me. But for me, if you were my manager, if you were on my team, why not fight against Pereira, a guy who's the same age as you? Business-wise, it makes more sense. Fight the nobody that may be more dangerous, or fight the guy with all the accolades.
And as soon as the UFC heard that, they should have put something in the contract that he would stay and defend the belt, or just not book the fight in general. So the last theme here is history repeats itself. None of this is new. The UFC has always had this pattern. Like I said before with Francis Ngannou, he spoke out about the UFC and the way they handle their contracts. He was frozen out of the company. Aljamain Sterling stood up for himself and then got disrespected publicly. Belal Muhammad, even after becoming the champion, was forced to fight on a card that got absolutely 0 traction. And now Tom's in that same category. He's talented, has extreme star potential, not to mention he's extremely genuine, but just doesn't play Dana White's games. So what happens now? If Tom Aspinall and his dad continue to go along this trajectory, the UFC will continue to stall him and not give him fights just to prolong his contract, and will continue to put put him on these very poorly stacked cards to ruin his star power, and also to have evidence that he's not a big draw, so that once he does leave the UFC, there's less options on the table for him. The UFC loves loyal yes men, and Tom Aspinall and Andy Aspinall just aren't that. I just find it crazy how Tom Aspinall is one of the most likable guys on the UFC roster, but the UFC are just treating him so poorly. I feel like I've known this for a long time, and I'm so glad that the rest of the fan base is starting to really pick up on this. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me? Make sure you guys do drop a like on this video. Make sure to subscribe as well, man. Thank you guys so much for 600 subscribers, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.